you will notice many times in the New Testament, people came to Jesus and said, where did you get the authority to say this? Not, we don't agree with it. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But who gave you the authority to make this new teaching? Now, how did you get smicha? Way back in the Old Testament, Moses and Aaron chose 70 helpers. Moses and Aaron both placed their hands on the heads of the 70 and declared that the 70 had God's authority. The Jews believed those 70 passed to their helpers, 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 and eventually it got to the New Testament. So the only way to get smicha is to have two people who have it in public put their hands on your head and declare that you have it too. Are you with me? Now that begs the obvious question. Before I go there, in the rabbinic model, the fundamental way to teach is not to give answers, but to raise questions that lead others to answers. I've been in many a graduate class where the prof will start with a question. Find 35 faces in the verse, don't eat monitor lizards. Then he'll say, what do you think? And you have to see this to believe it, because these will be a group of people, and they will go at it like piranha fish. But it's not, this is what I think, this is what I think, this is what I think. It's, quote a verse, I think that means this. Oh yeah, but what about, and then quote a verse, I think that says this. And somebody on the corner says, yeah, but what about Isaiah? He said, and quote that, and they'll go on for 20 minutes. When they've finished their discussion, somebody will formulate a question back to the teacher and say, well, if one of the faces of the monitor lizard is God said don't eat things that eat carrion, why don't we eat carrion? Now what you've done is you've answered the question with another question, and the rabbi will then think about the question, and then he will posit another question. And that'll go on for an hour. And not one single answer is ever given. Notice how often when people came to Jesus, they said, may I ask you a question? Jesus said, yes. And they would say, what's the chief commandment? And what would Jesus do? What does the law say? He'll ask him a question back. He's in the temple at 12 years of age, and they were amazed at his questions. Not his answers, his questions. I remember about 5 or 7 years ago, I took a group which was largely Christian school Christians who teach school, mostly Christian school, but some public school teachers too. And we went to Israel with a focus on what can we take out of this that helps us become better educators. And there was a lady, I tend to be way too dogmatic on some things, and I said, remember, Jesus is not the answer man, he's the question man. He doesn't want to give you all the answers. He wants to help you raise the right questions. Well, that offended her, in a nice way. She wasn't mad at me, but she said, no, Jesus is my answer man. He's always given me all the answers. Okay, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it that way. We were in Tzfat, Orthodox Jewish community, way up in northern Israel. And I wanted people to experience the Orthodox Jewish way of life. And so they're wandering through the streets and buying the kind of stuff you talked about, people asked me about. And her name is Dottie, she walked into this photography shop. Now there's an old rabbi in Tzfat, still has the concentration number on his arm, Polish. And he's a photographer. He must be 85 or 90, I don't know. And maybe older. She's looking around at this stuff. Now she's a photographer too, and she's seeing this gorgeous stuff. It's all impressionistic because they can't take pictures of people and animals. So she said to him, without realizing what she was doing, she said, may I ask you a question? And he said, yes, what is it? And she said, which is your favorite? And he said, are you married? To which she said, and she's very fortunate, she said, yes, why? Because if she had said yes, he would have said, oh. And she never would have figured out what on earth that conversation was about. She said, yes, why? And he said, do you have any children? And she said, yes, a son and 2 daughters. Why? And he said, which one is your favorite? Now, understand the power of the rabbinic model, because what she ended up doing is answering her own question, which means far more than if I gave her the answer, because then it's mine. She can pitch it, she can discount it, she can believe it or not. This was her answer. She came out of the store crying. She said, I met Jesus in there. I had to run in and see whether it was right, but that's the rabbinic model. So when you ask a rabbi a question, he responds with a question. What is his question to your question? What's the relationship? You ask him a question, he responds with a question. What is his question intending to do? Answer yours, or lead you to the answer. Now come with me. They came to the temple with Jesus. And the Sadducees, the Judeans, say to him, who gave you the authority to say this? That's a new teaching, Jesus. What did he say? Who gave John the Baptist smicha? He responds with a question. Who did he just tell them he got smicha from? John the Baptist. Who did you get smicha from? Let me ask you a question. Who did John get smicha from? John is the answer to your question. Now come with me to the bank of the Jordan River. Jesus comes down. John is probably his teacher. What does John say? Behold, the Lamb of God, the sin of the world. Does that sound like authority? You better believe it. There's no question John is saying this man has God's authority. What's the problem? That's only one. What happens next? Before the dove. Look at Mark. It says, and the heavens were ripped open. God couldn't even wait to open the window. Whoom! And the voice said, this is my son whom I love. Listen to him. You have the only rabbi in history that got his smicha directly from God. When I started at yeshiva, I was always intimidated because these guys all knew their Bible by memory. They had all these great rabbis, and they would look at me. They would start telling a story, and they'd want to use Jesus as an illustration. They'd say, oh, they called me RVL. RVL over here, he knows his rabbi did this. Go ahead and explain to us your rabbi's teaching. And I had to say, I don't know. You guys are right. Christians know nothing. I don't know. Teach me. And I used to walk out feeling so embarrassed for Jesus because I let him down day after day after day after day because I didn't know the text. And I remember like it was yesterday, David Flusser teaching the smicha of the rabbis and saying, Ariel over here is the only person in here whose rabbi got his smicha directly from God. And I'm thinking to myself, the reason I'm so embarrassed is because I'm worried about what I think like, what I look like. I am deeply honored and intensely proud to follow a rabbi who has smicha. And then at the end of his life, he said, all smicha in heaven and on earth has been given to me, and I give it to you.
Now, did the gentleman that you're with, do they believe?
We'll get to that. A great question. I forgot your first name. Jeff. Great question. Why don't some Orthodox Jews see Jesus as Messiah? We'll get to that. I think there's a very logical reason. There are many, but one at least that I think you'll resonate with. Enoch. Yes. You're right. What they would mean is, obviously Moses went up to Mount Sinai to get his smicha from God. And so did Aaron get his smicha from God. Since then, every person got smicha from someone else. So not only did Jesus come, people, to be a rabbi, not only did he go to Galilee, but he came to be a rabbi with smicha. Okay, let's move the next step.